So today I get the distinct pleasure to introduce a colleague, a friend, prayer partner, confidant. I don't know, it could keep going. Reverend Karin and I have been friends now almost as long as I've been part of Centers for Spiritual Living. Reverend Terry thought it would be a great idea as a young practitioner thinking about ministerial that I should partner up with Reverend Karin and that we should start moving along this path. So I've been so fortunate to be walking this path with her over the last quite a few years. And Reverend Karin is right now an interim minister with our CSL organization. So she goes in and she will help other centers, as Reverend Nadine came and helped us in between ministers. And she also writes for the Science of Mind magazine, and she happens to have an article in the magazine this month. So we're so fortunate that she's here speaking with us today. So I could go on and on about all her accomplishment, but as a journalist and as a minister, but I'll let her speak for herself. And warmly welcome Rev Karin Willmer.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm just wondering which mic is on. Okay, mine's on. Good. Good to see you all. Really good to see you all. I'm just gazing around the room, checking you all out. It's been a long time since I've spoken anywhere. Actually, can you turn the echo down just a wee bit? I feel like I'm getting a bit of feedback. It just feels almost like, that's so much better. Can you still hear me? Okay, good. So, yeah, it's been about 2 years since I've done a talk anywhere. And I was thinking about, well, why is it that I haven't done a talk anywhere? And I'll tell you the truth of it is that this really is by divine perfection that I would be coming here, because honestly, I didn't feel perfect enough to come before a spiritual community and talk about spiritual principle in the midst of me virtually drowning in trying to figure out what the heck spiritual principle was happening in my life in that moment. So it's like a lot of Science of Mind ministers will show up, and I will applaud them for doing so. I will say perhaps they are more stronger than I am. However, I was feeling vulnerable and protective about myself, but also protective of my community, because I know how much weight is on our shoulders and responsibility in order to serve you, even if sometimes that might be a bit misplaced. We're not really that special. But I think it's important because this journey has taught me a lot in the last 2 years, and some of that is what I wrote about in my article. So I will touch on that a little bit, but not entirely. Around my own expectations and limitations about perfection and what that really means. Now, I was one of those children that was brought up by two, I would say, highly intellectually gifted individuals. My mother was a member of Mensa, which she never had any post-secondary education. She knew she should have done that, but it didn't happen for her. And so later in life, she took all the tests and sure enough, blazed through them and became a Mensa member. My father was a very gifted lawyer, retired. And so there was a lot of expectation around our intellectual capability. I still remember when I was 7 years old, and we had very far-reaching dinner conversations that covered religion, politics, and yes, sex, the big three. Nothing was off the table in our family. And my dad had just been introduced at that time to Edward de Bono, who was quite a well-known thinker of the day, and wrote a very good book called, I think it's the Six thinking hats. And so he gave me exercises at age 7 that I was supposed to help, figure out in my head what the lateral thinking, because that's what his area of expertise was, answer to the problem as opposed to linear thinking. So it was pretty intense growing up. And the questions when I got, back from school and I got my little grade 3 report card, and they were so willing to move me. The school was so willing to bump me up like a whole grade, maybe even 2 for my English and my writing. But there was a little bit of a problem. My math was equally as far behind as my English was ahead. So I would come home with my report cards, and the question often was some version thereof of what happened to the other 3%. So I'm sure that it was just to encourage me, and recognize that I was there, but that's not, of course, what I heard. What I heard was that I was a failure. And anytime those kinds of buttons get pushed in whatever way they get pushed, and they get pushed a lot in life, because, we're always stretching and we're always growing, it can devastate me. And it can devastate me in some very particular areas for, I don't know, years. So I'll just hide. I'll just okay, that thing over there, I'm just not going to do any of that thing over there. And I'll go over here. So my hiding, because of my, issue around perfection, has actually expanded in this time to the point where, maybe I'm not doing a talk. And then maybe I'm not writing in my journal every morning. And maybe I'm not oh my goodness, can I actually still write? And I was a journalist. Can I still write an article for Science Mind magazine? I don't know. I'm going to say yes, because I know that's the right answer, but I'm scared out of my mind. So it just expanded to the point where for a certain time, I think last year, I don't think I wrote anything for 365 days. Not even a paragraph. Not even a paragraph. And that's something that I've done since I was a child. So you can see how a certain kind of mindset, and maybe I'm an extreme example, maybe you can see yourself in parts of what I'm saying, but how even an example of this can result in the principle of, or non-principle really, of just non-action. And we know spiritually that the whole point of creativity, the creative expression, the creative mind, the creative life, the whole point of it is to grow and to stretch and to expand and to be and to live and to flow with whatever those energies are, whatever it is that's presenting us. Instead of resisting it, which was, I was deep into all of that, instead of resisting it, it's oh, well, what if I just tried it this way? Or what if I just said, you know what? Today's okay, and I can just write crap. I give myself permission to write crap. That's good. I'll do that, right? Or maybe if I'm like a gardener, I don't put myself up on a huge pedestal, even though I may have been able to accomplish that in the past, and I just start small. I'm just going to do a few seeds. I'm just going to plant a few seeds. Like last year, I planted way too much and I couldn't take care of them all. This year, I'm just going to plant 5. Can I take care of 5? Yes, I think I can. And I will nourish those 5 so they are the most beautiful things you've ever seen in this entire world. And that's good, because that is the creative expression. That is growth. That is supporting that energy of who we are. And no matter where we are on our journey, regardless of how old we are or how young we are always doing some version of that kind of growth when we are in alignment with our spiritual self and our spiritual well-being. So I want to give you a little bit of a different kind of analogy. How many of you are familiar with bonsai trees? Everybody. I figured, we're highly influenced by Pacific Northwest, Japan, etc. So do you know how long, or who knows how long a bonsai tree can live for? 150 years. Now that's pretty good because it can be passed from one generation, kind of like a parrot. It can be passed from one generation to another. The oldest living bonsai tree is at a temple in Tokyo, and the estimated age of this bonsai tree is 500 years. Pretty incredible. So as I was any of us didn't know anything about this at the time, but I was entering into a very particular transition of my own life. And my mother, who came from Denmark, she gave us a beautiful Christmas present, my sister and I. And I don't know how many of you know Lego is from Denmark. This is like a national, if you're Danish, you have to know Lego is from Denmark. When you meet people, you have to tell them. It's sort of a rule. So anyway, they have a new thing. They've got adult Lego. I'm just saying. And so my sister got an adult Lego set. And she got a beautiful bouquet of flowers. But my mom, just saying, she gave me a bonsai tree. So I have a bonsai Lego tree, which I thought about bringing, and then I thought about how much space there might be, and so I didn't bring it. But I can send a picture if you like. And I started to create this bonsai tree, and it was very complicated, and I still haven't done the full base for the whole thing in full transparency. And you can add pink flowers to it for the spring and for the summer. And as I started to work on this, it turned out that my mother was beginning to be at the end of her life, the six weeks or so. And of course, we didn't know it was going to be 6 weeks. At one point, it looked like 8 months, and then it was just a constantly moving thing. And it's hard to have something like a Lego thing turn into something like that journey, but there's some metaphors in there that I think are actually amazing for this thing about perfectly imperfect. So a bonsai tree looks perfect, absolutely perfect. But to create that perfection requires a lot of pruning of the roots. Snip, 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 special scissors used to keep it small, tight, clear, not all gnarled up and unable to take in the nutrients that it needs. Also requires some of the growth to be snip, snip, snip as well. This seems to me to be a really good metaphor for a perfect life. When we are conscious and when we are aware, as we are being our imperfectly perfect selves, and we go along, if we can work on our roots. Where have we come from? How do we want to show up in the world in light of that? Are there areas that need to be, snipped back a little bit? Do we need more water? Do we need more nourishment? Is there more love that's necessary to sort of have those roots embed in ourselves so that we can claim them and honor them for all that they are? At the same time, we've got our growth thing happening. And you know what happens, right? Like, whoa, I'll go over here. Oh, I'll go over here. Oh, I'm not going to go over there. And so we're all over the place. Pruning, we have to do that too. Because that we've learned, even though we got sold it for a long time, multitasking is perfect. But really, maybe not so much. So we multitasked everywhere, and it's like, well, now I'm not accomplishing anything. I need to prune back over here so that I can really focus on what's happening over here. When I was a child of about, 7 or 8, all my core memories around that age, my Danish grandmother came over from Copenhagen to visit. And she would have been, I'm guessing she would have been in her late 50s, or maybe early 50s, somewhere in that neighborhood. And she was at that stage of life where she was starting to get a little self-conscious about her wrinkles. So she asked me, or she commented on it. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I've heard the story back, so I know it's true. My automatic response to her was, I don't understand. It just shows how much you've smiled all life. Like, that's how I saw her. And isn't that really how we want to see anybody that is at the end of their lives, right? Those brilliant, beautiful, amazing humans that have light in their eyes, as my mom did in those last few weeks of her life when she wasn't too drugged up or in too much pain, right? But when she was there and she was conscious, right? She blossomed with the fullness of light. She had the fullness of love. She was grateful for absolutely everything, and she wasn't taking any bullshit at the same time, right? She was in control. She knew who she was. She knew who she loved. She knew how she had lived, and she was grateful for everything that she had done. And yet, somebody else looking at it might say, well, it sure wasn't perfect. But it was. She was perfectly, perfectly, perfectly imperfect. And if there's anything that I would ever want for myself, would be to be able to flow in a greater sense and in a greater way with that genuine aspect of perfection. So all of these stories, I haven't even looked at my notes once, all of these stories are really by way of kind of grounding in you what the principle is about wholeness. Wholeness means accepting all of the parts of who we are. Wholeness, as opposed to perfection, the typical view of perfection, wholeness keeps us aware of all of the parts and allows us space enough to be in a place of choice. Choice to make the decisions that serve each of us as that individualized expression of spirit. And when I know I am in a place of choice, I've got way more capacity to do things. When I'm in a state of perfection, I go into freeze mode. I can't do anything. I don't know what the heck I'm doing because everything feels like it's going to be wrong. And so I shrink back, and the other thing that I do, and this isn't just me, this is like one of those basic things that happens, is I do a lot of comparison and I do a lot of judgment. Now, I've shifted a little bit, a lot of the judgment, remember my father was a lawyer, a lot of my judgment was external. And when I'm in one of my not so great states, the amount of judgment I give myself. Massive, 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 right? I just switched it. So now it's not out there so much, now it's more in here. Maybe not any more helpful than the reverse. So the next piece of that is to be able to give ourselves compassion. When we give ourselves compassion for these moments when we come up against ourselves, it reminds us and supports us in being able to give others the very same compassion. So it's like, oh yeah, I recognize that I'm in perhaps judgment of something because I recognize that in me. So I give self-compassion to me, which in turn enables me to give self-compassion to that person that moments ago I may have been in judgment of. We are divine expressions of the one mind, absolutely. And the one mind is actually calling upon us to step into that individualized expression. There's so much criticism and polarization out there right now, so much this is right and this is wrong. This is right, this is wrong. Zen Buddhism, and I think science of mind, both, look at the whole thing and they don't even get into that conversation. Don't even enter into that conversation. It is all God, because when we look in the internal, we can see it with different eyes and recognize the beauty. Perhaps that thing that you thought was wrong is simply a sign to yourself to go in a different direction. What's my piece in this? What am I to do with this information if I feel this strongly? Do I just want to be an opinionated person, or do I want to take action to support a bigger idea that could move this planet in a bigger way? That's possible too. We have those choices right in front of us to be able to do whatever it is that we choose to do that is ours, our individual selves to do. I just want to give you a couple of, quote kind of things. So I looked up the actual definition of perfection, and it says the conditioned state or quality of being free, or as free as possible from all flaws or defects. How human is that? How human is it to be free from all possible flaws or defects? And what illusion are we buying into when we think that's possible? What are we denying ourselves when we think that's possible? And here's a great little example that the dictionary offered up to me. I did not offer this example. The satiny perfection of her skin. Think about the whole cosmetic industry. Not that I don't wear cosmetics, but think about it. What's it doing? It's selling us an idea that, something needs to be better. And yes, I wear cosmetics. So there's a vanity project there. But nonetheless, there's something in here about this illusion that we have that we can be free of our flaws versus being in a place of acceptance. The other one that I hear a lot in Science of Mind circles is the phrase, I am perfect, whole, and complete. I had a hard time with that in the beginning. Then I had a not so hard time with it. And now I just want to ditch it. I am perfect. I am comfortable with whole. I am whole. I am completely comfortable with that. But perfect, I don't think I want to be perfect. And I don't want anybody else to think that I am. Because again, it feels like a standard. And yet, I also know that when I look at a tree growing, and I did this just this week, I saw a tree growing, and it was an incredibly, incredibly panoramic view, absolutely stunning, and I'm a total lover of trees, any kind of tree, baby trees, big trees, little trees, I love them all. And I looked at this one tree and I went, oh, what happened to that branch? And it was like, you just can't help yourself. You just can't help yourself. It's absolute perfection. So my human nature is that I always see something. So I need to accept that even in my always seeing something, that too is perfect. But it's a different kind of perfect. Maybe if I come back in another 10 years, I'll have another word for it. So just contemplate for yourself what you want to have for yourself. Does perfect work for you? If it works for you, keep using it. If it doesn't work for you, find what does. Because the essence of that idea is much bigger than perhaps, if you're like the bonsai tree, if you think about yourself as the bonsai tree, then of course you're perfect. Because you have the awareness that you have been pruned and you have been cut. And then you are that perfect, because you've incorporated all of that awareness into the fullness of who you are, which is what we hope to do. So the symptoms, again, of perfection is that it can hinder our personal and spiritual growth. It can result in paralysis, non-action, withdrawal from life. I talked about that. And here is a Science of Mind quote, page 448.1, for those of you who are interested. The whole purpose of the science of mind is to reconcile the apparent separation of the spiritual world, which must be perfect, with the material world, which appears imperfect. So that wholeness, when we move into that absolute, when we are in that state of absolute, where we no longer see I and other, we are no longer in a place of separation, polarization, any of those things. When we are in that state, we are truly in nirvana. We are living, breathing, walking in alignment with the life that is. And then we are truly in perfection, because we are living from that spiritualized center of ourselves. So the last thing that I wanted to share with you was to stop trying to fix ourselves, because we're not broken. In the midst of all of this cutting and pruning, it's for an illumination of the spirit, an illumination of that inner part of ourselves when we come into that place of wholeness. The fixing is another way of judgment, right? If I need to fix it, that means it's broken, which means it's wrong. It's not wrong. And there is a Japanese, going back to the Japan again across the water, the Japanese beautiful practice of a cup, which is a container, right? And we can think about a container as being something that reminds us of the wholeness of life. And if a cup is broken, there is a practice of mending it, but you don't mend it with regular glue, you use gold. Because every crack that needs to be coming back together is actually creating something that was even stronger than it was prior. So that's what I have to share with you today. Thank you for being my first audience in 2 years. I'm deeply grateful, and I have a prayer, a treatment as well, that I wanted to share with you. So if you'd like to close your eyes, and here we go. So knowing this new idea of perfection, that it encompasses all of me, the fullness of my individual creative expression, I share this to close us. There is only one divine living life that is operating right here and now. It is that energy that flows through absolutely everything, that creative spark, that seed that eagerly awaits its opportunity to sprout. I know this divine life lives within me and all those around me, is the essence of my being, and I know that my unique expression in this world is here actively engaging in life. Today I release my belief in ego perfection and take on this bigger idea of life. I release my need to compare, to criticize myself and others when I fall into judgment. Today I embrace my ability to recognize my gifts, apply them, and use them to be of service to the world. Today I relish in my capacity to learn and grow, to see new vistas, new horizons I may never have seen before. Today I declare myself to be free of restriction and limitation, knowing that as the tree grows in the forest, it finds its own way upwards. I'm so grateful for this renewed awareness of this divine expression that lives within me. I am grateful for community that reaches out and up in support of this greater idea of God operating in and through all things. And so I release these words, knowing that I see with cleansed eyes and a peaceful heart. All is well, and so it is.